Have you ever stopped to think about how our perspectives and beliefs are often shaped by the ideas around which we grow up? Most of us would say that school and education form a very important part of it. But what if we are forced into a system that pushes only a certain narrative? A system that is quick to label any alternate view as controversial. Let's take some examples. I'm sure you have heard about capitalism and socialism. They are often treated as two ends of a spectrum that can explain any economic model. But have you heard of what we can call dharmicism, or India's own indigenous economic model? India occupied 33% of the world's wealth for several millennia before being colonized. Just to put things in perspective, the USA, which is the richest country in the world today, occupies only 20% of the world's wealth. So surely, India's model made it rich not just culturally but also economically. But despite such achievements, we never hear of this model even in higher education. Did you know that before the 19th century, there was no Indian who would call themselves Hindu by religion? But today, almost 80% of India's population call themselves Hindu. Something quite doesn't add up, does it? So surely there is a mismatch. What is the real religious identity of these people? And why is the so-called majority living in amnesia even after 75 years of independence? India owns some of the oldest and most extensive literature on history and genealogy, much more than the entire ancient world combined. Yet, we are told that ours was an oral culture and that we lacked historical sense. Marxist or even nationalist historiography are topic of many TV debates. Some of us may have even heard of terms like post-colonialism or postmodernism. But have you heard of what is called the decolonial school? More importantly, do you have any understanding of the dharmic school of historiography that manifested itself in the form of itihasas and Purans? Every civilization, including ours, remembered its history differently. So why is it that the historiographical model of the West considered a benchmark to decide if other traditions are historical or not? Have you ever noticed that anything that is labeled as modern is usually associated with West, and anything that is labeled as traditional is usually indigenous? Take clothing for example. Whenever you think of modern clothes, you invariably think of Western clothes. But what about African, Chinese, Indian, Korean and other styles? When the idea of secularism was born in Europe, it did not mean separation of state from religion. It simply aimed at separation of state Christianity from other forms of Christianity. But in spite of its obvious affiliations, today it is sold as a universal idea. So how do you think that happened? Zero is not the only scientific discovery made in India. From Pascal's triangles to the Rolle's theorem, from gravitation to solar system, and even the practice of yoga and meditation are all from India. What's worse is that the time gap between them being invented or discovered in India and them appearing in the West is not by a few decades but several centuries. And this process of plagiarizing indigenous knowledge systems that started during the period of colonization has not come to an end. Even today, yoga piracy is a very serious business in the West, trying to take away all dharmic and Indian roots from it. Last but not the least, more than 40 surgical instruments that find their mention in the Sushruta Samhita are used even today for surgery. In fact, it is the oldest book that contains an extensive documentation of various kinds of surgical procedures. But here again, the Ayurvedic doctors were not allowed to perform surgery even till 2020. These facts are not just tip of the iceberg. Clearly, a colonized view of us and our culture is not just restricted to our history books. It goes much beyond and affects all aspects of our lives even today. Join us at Virasatya as we break all of this down for you one by one. Thanks for tuning in and we'll see you next time.